Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We'd like to start tonight's meeting, and we'd like to start with the pledge. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. You have a call to order, please? We did that. I'm sorry. Roll call.
Councilwoman Albrecht.
Here.
Councilman Mazzella.
Here.
Councilman O'Hanlon.
Here.
Councilman Reifenberg.
Here.
Supervisor Del Vecchio.
Here.
Town Attorney Emily Swenson. Here. All present.
Okay. Before we have the adoption to the agenda, I believe we have something for special consideration.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to add a old business discussion item for proposed local law B of 2022, print number 3. It has to do with the junk motor vehicle law, and we'll put it under old business discussion.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye. And I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no public hearings tonight. We are in receipt of the acceptance of the minutes from the special town board meeting on 2/27/23 and our regular town board meeting 2/27/23. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All official correspondence are on file at the town clerk's office. And presentations. So the first one up is me. So as most of you already know, if you do not already know, I will not be running for town supervisor again. It has been my honor and privilege to serve this town, and in different capacities, one as a volunteer, one as a councilman, and now as your supervisor. I can't thank you enough for allowing me to have that opportunity to serve. But this town happens to have a little bit of a rumor problem. And so I thought it would be necessary to actually make this statement. The reason why I'm not running is due to health reasons. I've received a couple of different, let's say, guesstimates as to what my health problems were, and they were not even close. So back when I had COVID, they kind of hurt my kidneys pretty good, and that's what I'm dealing with. So in order to get them better, or keep them where they are and not get any worse, special diets. Some of you may have already noticed that I've lost a little bit of weight already. Special diet's important, and no aggravation. So that's one of the doctor's orders, and that's what I have to follow. So, but that all being said, I do not want to at all upstage what's happening tonight, because tonight's very important for everyone to hear. But I will state that I will finish my term. I will do my exact same amount of work that I did from day one. I will continue. Nothing will be put on back burners because we save it for somebody else to do. All projects will go forward. And that's pretty much it. And my next focus will be to whomever does sit in this seat, whoever that person may be. They will be prepared day one. I don't care who it is. I don't care what party they come from, how they win, whatever the story is. Those candidates will be brought up to speed all along the process the closer we get up to the point of the decision. And then that person will have the rest of the time from election day till the day they take over. They will have me right by their side to learn everything there is about this job. And that's my pledge to all the candidates, anyone else who wants to learn. Once again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to serve. It's been my honor and privilege. Without any further ado, we're going to move on to the next presentation, which is our town auditor's presentation. Now, before we go into this, I just want to reiterate, there cannot be, because of the Zoom piece, any questions during this part. mainly because we had them here a couple of weeks ago when we had the meeting all set. Then we could have had the Q&A, but then we had that little problem. We had to cancel it. So there won't be any Q&A, but I do ask you all to please listen closely. It's very informative, and I think you'll be somewhat pleased.
Okay, you guys are good.
All right, a sound check. If I could just get a confirmation, is everybody hearing us okay?
Yep, you sound good.
Very good. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for having us tonight. A couple weeks from what we originally anticipated, but happy to make it happen tonight. My name is Carl Widmer. I am a partner at Drescher Milwaukee, and we've signed on as the town's auditors. Also with me tonight is Nick Petronic. He was a manager on the engagement, and he's been with us for several years and helped get the town of Pleasant Valley's audit going for the first year. Tonight, we had a chance to have an exit meeting just about a month ago now with management and a couple members of the board to go over in more detail the drafts of the audit, observations that we may have had, and just going over in more detail and in preparation of this presentation tonight. So tonight's presentation, what we've done is put together a short slideshow that we've had success with at other clients as far as covering a little bit of the audit process, what our role is to the town, and then also touching on the actual financial results of the audit for the fiscal year. Of course, we're talking about the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2021. Of course, this is, we're very far removed since then, now entering spring of 2023. However, the town went through a bunch of transitions previously and ended up hiring us back in November. So we did try to turn around an audit pretty quickly. We're excited to move on to conclude on this fiscal year's audit, and then moving on to the scheduled fiscal year 2022, and then having a presentation that's going to include a little bit more current or relevant financial information. But without further ado, I will share my screen. Okay. So tonight's presentation, what it'll include, we'll begin with a few of the auditor communications. I mentioned before, we did get a chance to have an exit meeting with management and go over in greater detail. The financial statements, that package is over 50 pages. There's also a couple letters and a departmental audit that went along with it. In the interest of time, the presentations to a full board are, of course, condensed. But we do think we had a successful conversation at that exit meeting previously. But we will touch on what those required communications are on the following slide. After the audit communications, we'll move into the financial statement update, and that's going to be the results of the audit for the fiscal year 2021. It is a focus on the town's major operating funds, being, of course, your general fund, and then also the highway fund. Finally, just some observations. This gives us a chance to really set the numbers aside and just talk about what we saw as we went through the town's audit this past year, over the past few months, and any recommendations that we might have that we'll certainly be paying close attention to in subsequent years' audits. So those auditor communications, as the external auditor to the town, we have some required communications that must be made to the board each year. These were gone over at that previous meeting, but tonight, I think both to the public and to the full board, there's a few of these that I want to touch on. The first is our responsibility under GAS, and that stands for Generally Accepted Auditing Standards. And there's two pieces here, and the first is our responsibility is to design an audit to gain assurance over the numbers that are in the town's financial statements. And what's important there is differentiating that this package is not Drescher Malecki's audit. It's not our financial statements. They're the town's financial statements. We simply help put a package together, but everything absent our opinion that's on our letterhead in that package is property and the responsibility of the town themselves. They maintain a general ledger and the transactions throughout the year that support and create these financial statements that are presented in the year-end audit booklet that you see. So our responsibility is not for those numbers, but for the audit of those numbers and to ultimately come up with what's called our professional opinion. So the town has many different users as far as financial statements. Who's going to be reading these financial statements? You have, of course, your resident taxpayers. The board is going to be concerned. The state comptroller's office, granting agencies, banks, the bond market when you go out to borrow. All these entities are looking at these financial statements, and what they're relying on is an external auditor's professional opinion that the numbers that have been put together and managed by the town throughout the year, that those numbers presented in the financials can be relied upon as being fairly stated. Drescher Malecki provides that opinion. We are that independent third party that serves that role. Another responsibility that I like to differentiate the other piece here is that our audit is designed to gain assurance over the financial statement amounts. It is not designed to look for fraud. I think oftentimes you hear external auditors or just the word audit, and many times it's associated with looking for fraud. So I've been including this in presentations just to deliver that message that while we believe if there were any material impact or material fraud occurring in the year that we're auditing, we believe our audit would uncover it, but our testing is not designed to search for fraud and then communicate it. That said, going through our process, there was nothing that indicated any fraud. Had we encountered anything, it would have been brought to the board's attention and discussed how to proceed, but happy to report that that wasn't an issue for this year. The next two items, we'll jump down to independence. Of course, if the readers and the users of the town's financial statements are going to rely on Drescher Malecki to provide an audit opinion, it's imperative that we have no conflicts of interest and that we're, in fact, independent from the town. I'll provide the extreme example here. And if I were to say that the supervisor was my father or my brother, I wouldn't be in the appropriate unbiased position to serve as the town's external auditor. Myself, Nick, our entire audit firm, we review all the relationships that potentially we would have with the town and make sure that we are in the right position to serve as the external auditors. And we do this on an annual basis. So we're in the right position this year. Finally, under other matters, this was something where I just like to communicate that we received full cooperation from everybody at the town that we inquired of during our procedures. In the event that they were to limit the scope or maybe say, oh, you can't look at those records, why don't you look at these instead? That would be something that I would have to report. We received full cooperation and also received full access and had no limits on the scope of our audit. Of course, there's a change in auditors, and with the change in auditors, the financial statements themselves are going to look a little bit different from the prior years. Not just the format. This year, we took a deeper look into the fund structure at the town and are going to be reporting what we think is a little more transparent point of view. Previously, there were several special revenue funds that were grouped together in the financial statements. And included in that grouping of the special revenue funds was the highway fund. That actually qualifies as a major operating fund this year. And when you look at the financial statements for 2021, you'll see the balance sheet has a separate column for the general fund, the highway fund, a capital projects fund, and then they group another column called the non-major funds, which is going to capture those smaller special revenue funds. So just an update on that. I do want to pause here before we get into the financial update. We're going to take that macro perspective at the general fund and the highway fund. Were there any questions from the board regarding our audit process itself, sort of dollars aside? All right, hearing none, move forward. Start off with the start of the show. Really, the general fund is responsible for the lion's share of activity at the town of Pleasant Valley. For the general fund and also for the highway fund, we'll present two primary financial slides. The first is going to be a line graph showing the revenue and the expenditure activity for each of the last 2 years. Of course, the reminder, these are fiscal years ended December 31st, 2020 and 2021. Anything that happens subsequent to December 31st, 2021, we will capture the 12 months for the fiscal year ended 2022 in the next year's audit that we'll be performing this summer and fall. So here, if you do look at 2021, you see an increase from the prior year, both on the revenue and the expenditure side. On the revenues, they totaled $4 million this year. That's an increase of about $900,000 compared to the prior year. There are three main attributors to that increase in revenues. And number one is probably no surprise to anybody who's been paying attention to the town's finances, and that's sales tax. New York State sales tax has been favorable coming off that initial year of COVID. The trends have been positive, and sales tax came in over $300,000 higher than the fiscal year ended 2020. Also, as things got up and running, that 2020 year, of course, was the start of the pandemic. There was a lot of pause as far as spending and revenue. 2021, things sort of got back up and running a little bit closer to normal. So the recreation and zoning fees saw a nice increase from 2020, up over $150,000 from the prior year. Finally, mortgage tax, which is going to be presented in the state aid revenue line, was up over $170,000 from that of 2020. On the spending side, total expenditures, $2.9 million. That includes $360,000 of a transfer out to the capital projects fund. That was the number one increase as far as a focus area for increased spending from the prior year. Otherwise, I'd say you saw an overall increase in all areas as a result of COVID getting a little bit used to it and the town getting its operations going compared to 2020. So as a whole, fiscal year 2021, we had $4 million of revenue, $2.9 million of expenditures. That's going to be a net increase or income for that year of about $1.1 million. And the second slide that we'll provide for each fund is going to switch from looking at the activity of the year, which we just did on the line graph, and present the equity position, the fund balance for the general fund. 2020 and 2021, you see there are two primary areas that carried forward from the prior year. From top to bottom, that red portion for 2021 is $2.66 million. That represents restricted fund balance. Those are funds that have external restrictions on them. They are funds that are set aside for several purposes, but the primary is going to be capital projects, compensated absences, and recreation reserves. A new category that you'll see in the middle of 2021 is called assigned fund balance. This is a category that previously the town hadn't really exercised their ability to assign fund balance, but a major theme and observation that we'll cover at the end of the presentation is just overall fund balance monitoring and planning. It ties into the capital plan of the town's future years. Of course, it comes into play at budgeting time. And there's some decisions that need to be made. So after a few of the initial conversations over fund balance, we discussed the option to assign fund balance with the group, and they decided as a board that they wanted to assign $1.1 billion, which comprises $975,000 for capital and $125,000 for equipment, for future year spending. They know that there's a laundry list of different things that the town's going to be required to pay for, and they don't anticipate raising that revenue just in the current year's budget. So they anticipate using the fund balance on the books to move forward and make those spends. The bottom portion, the dark blue, which totals $3.3 million at the end of 2021, is called the unassigned fund balance. This is unreserved. It is the available fund balance. This is an area that if a reader has only 5 minutes to look at the town's financial statements, oftentimes they're going to arrive at the general fund unassigned fund balance to give their impression on how the town's finances are doing. In this case, $3.3 million, that compares to the next year's budget. Oftentimes you'll take the unassigned general fund balance and compare it to 1 year's spending. So you look right to the next year's adopted budget, to which the general fund had $2.9 million budgeted for 2022. Moving on to the highway fund. Here you'll see, again, that activity graph showing expenditures, which increased from the prior year, and revenues, which decreased minorly. In this case, you see expenditures were above revenues for 2021, which is going to indicate a decrease or a use of fund balance for the year. Expenditures totaled about $1.8 million for fiscal year 21 and saw some expected increases that go along with salt purchases and the labor just to take care of roads and snow removal. That's going to, vary by year depending on what sort of weather the town receives. But in addition to that, they also made a couple of very large equipment purchases that they had planned on and using fund balance for, and had held off during that 2020 COVID year, just as a precaution to see how they fared through the COVID pandemic. On the revenue side, $1.6 million for the year, pretty consistent with the prior year, just down a little bit. And that really represents a decrease in the levied real property taxes for the highway fund. That decrease in real property taxes was offset by an increase in CHIPS funding. CHIPS is state aid funding to help towards the maintenance of roads and bridges. Total spending of $1.8 million. Total money coming in, $1.6. The net decrease to fund balance was $265,000 for the year. And again, we'll move on to the fund balance picture here. And you'll see the total bar graph decreased from the prior year. That represents that $265,000 use. And the introduction of a reserve, $280,000 is here for equipment and compensated absences. And the available fund balance in the highway fund is actually labeled an assigned fund balance. This is just governmental accounting at its finest. In the general fund, available fund balance is called unassigned, and all other special revenue funds, it's called assigned for specific use. So we put both in the dark blue color just to indicate that this is the available portion. And when you want to compare it to a full year spending, 2022's adopted budget was about $1.9 million. So you have just about an equal amount in available fund balance to the next year's budget. Finally, we have observations. I think I'll stop sharing my screen here, but we do have contact information left here, just if anybody wanted to reach out following the presentation. But overall, we talked about the goal of our audit is to culminate with our professional opinion. We're prepared to issue a clean opinion on the town's fund financial statements. However, there was an adverse opinion put on the government-wide financial statements, which is a carry forward from the past couple of years in the town's financial statements. There are two main areas that the town is working on to produce better supporting records to include in the financials. And those areas include capital assets and also an actuarial liability number for what's called the OPEB liability. That's required as under GASB statement number 75. So really heavy accounting jargon there. But those are areas that we discussed with management and the board previously, and said, if it's not ready for 2021, let's make that a goal for the town for the fiscal year into 2022. So that's certainly the first stop when we begin our 2022 audit will be to evaluate those areas and see if we can clean that up and give an overall unmodified or clean opinion. In addition to the financial statements, we do work closely with management throughout the audit, different departments. We're making inquiries of several different staff throughout the course of our procedures, and we're looking at the internal controls. What procedures, what policies are in place that are taking care of the numbers that are presented in the town's financial statements. And Nick, I think if you don't mind giving me a breather here, you could walk through the reportable findings for the year, as well as a little glimpse at what we'll include in our management letter.
Thanks, Carl. Hello, everyone again. I just first off want to thank Melanie and her staff as well. They were very accommodating during the audit, and we experienced no issues obtaining documentation, and all of our requests were answered in a timely and efficient manner. As part of our report, as Carl mentioned, we issue a couple of our findings. One of those findings related to the town's overall record keeping and policies and procedures. I do want to note that during our testing, we did not find any error or any material misstatements, but due to the town's lack of policies and procedures and limited number of staff, we were required to report on opportunities existing for errors to occur. As part of our comment, we spoke with the town, and they had already hired an assistant bookkeeper to help strengthen internal controls in the finance office, and also helps with their separation of duties. And then the town has also drafted policies surrounding journal entries and bank reconciliations, two of the areas that we consider usually of higher risk during our audits. And they've drafted policies to kind of outline the procedures they're going to take moving forward to really strengthen the internal controls surrounding those cycles. Also, as part of our audit, we issue a separate management letter to the town, which basically outlines our recommendations or observations to management. There's 3 items we included in the letter. One being which surrounding basically IT policies and cybersecurity risks. The town should try to follow best practices as they identify and try to mitigate any potential cyber risks that may exist and have becoming more involved over the years. And the town should also continually monitor cyber insurance limits and make sure they're at an appropriate level when it comes to insured levels. Secondly, we recommend to the town, and this is a typical comment that we've been having for a lot of clients, but they designate an individual or committee responsible to oversee the relief funds that the town has received. And this pertains to the American Rescue Plan Act. As of December 31st, 2021, the town had received just shy of $1 million of American Rescue Plan funds. And we, like I said, we just want to recommend that the town is organized and there's a committee or individual responsible for those funds and to make sure that insurance is complied with the Treasury Department. Finally, one of our last recommendations we had, and Carl touched on it in the slides, but pertaining to the town's fund balance, the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, recommends municipalities adopting a form of policy that is usually approved by the board to kind of determine a threshold or percentage of unrestricted fund balance that's retained in the general fund each year. As Carl's mentioned, there's numerous items that go into this, whether it's cash flows, anticipated costs or risks coming up. But this would be just so the transparency is there from the board that there's an appropriate level of unassigned fund balance in the general fund every year for the town's future needs.
All right. Thanks, Nick. So that does, as far as the communications that we wanted to convey tonight at the presentation to the board, that does get us through all of those items. If there were any concerns or questions from the board tonight that you'd like us to touch on or elaborate on, we are available. If it's something that you wanted to digest a little bit and reach out to us afterwards, that's certainly a possibility as well. But I want to thank you for your time. We're happy that we signed up to work with the town. It's a great group over there, and we're excited to help improve going forward.
Take care of yours, right?
Thank you guys so much. I don't think anybody has any questions. We appreciate it, and sorry about 2 weeks ago.
Have a good night.
So in a nutshell, we're doing okay. Takes a lot of money to find that out the logistic ways, but we're in good shape. So the next presentation is going to basically lay out how we're set up. Michael's done some great work, or the finance committee has done some great work. By the way, any supervisor taking, you want to set up these subcommittees. They really, really work up really well, just to let you know, note. And again, there's not going to be any Q&A during this piece or afterwards, because we're not set up to answer questions on that just yet. But I think you'll be pleased with some of the information you're going to hear from Councilman Reifenberg. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi, good evening. So there's been lots of questions of accounts. How much money does the town have? Where is it all at? So I just want to start off with, this is going to basically break down the different accounts, where different money is allocated, what restrictions are on those accounts. I also want to note that the totals, we just listened to a half-hour presentation that was on the year of 2021. So we have to remember that these totals that I'm going to give you are from about a month ago. So we're talking about a year and 2 months or so since the numbers of what we just talked about. So you're going to see some differences. The boards since then have taken some action to change some of that stuff and start moving forward. So I just want to put that out there. I'll try to get through it fairly quick. The topics we're going to talk about is the town debt and where we stand there, breakdown of committed, restricted, assigned funds, the difference between assigned and what unassigned is. We heard some of those terms being used by the auditors, and what are our plans, or what have we been doing as a board moving forward. So a big question a lot of people ask is how much debt the town has. I was actually, and I want to start off by first saying thank you to Melanie, because our bookkeeper, we wouldn't have been able to put this presentation together, get the auditors together without her help. She's been great with this. But I was actually really surprised that the town of Pleasant Valley is only $12,000 in debt. That is pretty much unheard of for a municipality. Yep. There's two sides to the coin. You can either be saying we're not borrowing enough money, or this is great. So the only debt we have is for a phone system that was purchased a couple years ago. We pay $417.85 a month for that. And that will be done on June 2025, and we won't have any more debt for the town. Now I'm just going to start going through some of the different funds and how much money is in each one of them, and kind of a really high-level breakdown of what they're set up for, when they were set up. So this is what we're talking about: committed, restricted, and assigned funds. So the first one, which the auditors talked about, was ARPA. This was during COVID. I'm sure you heard it on the news. A lot of local municipalities were allocated money for that. And just like the auditors said, we have just around $1 million sitting in that to be used. So to note for this is it's available for use, but it's not part of the general fund. So when they were giving those numbers, this was not calculated in there. And the difference is the general fund we could use at any point. This we can't. There's a set of parameters on what this money can be spent on, and it's laid out for the town. There's specific reporting that needs to be done quarterly. And to the auditor's point, I think we're going to be recommending to the board to probably set up some sort of ARPA committee, just to make sure we have a plan. Basically, this money needs to be obligated. It doesn't have to be spent. It needs to be obligated by the end of 2024. So we have just under 2 years to make sure we have a plan to spend this money. It can't be spent on anything. There are parameters of what it can be spent on. But we've already, as a board, kind of been throwing around ideas and whatnot, but we got to get a little bit more serious about that. And then it needs to be spent, so the project that you allocate it for needs to be done, and the money needs to be spent by the end of 2026. So there's a 2-year grace period kind of in there. So that's $1 million. Next one's a special capital reserve. This has $1.1-ish million in it. It was established by resolution 2 decades ago. So back in 1990, is that two? No, that's 3 decades ago. A long time ago. 1992 is 3 decades ago, man. Basically, the town board back then created this account to finance capital improvements, including the purchasing, reconstruction, planning, development, and associated expenses related to capital projects and infrastructure. So examples of this, and they lay it out in the resolution, would be court, town hall boilers, air conditioner units, water district formation, so any kind of infrastructure plan. But you can see we have a little over $1.1 million that we can't just give back to the taxpayers, and we can't just spend it on anything. It was set aside for a reason, and over the years, town boards have put money from that unassigned general fund into this to continue for future use. There's an account or a separation of money for the new town hall. So when the town hall up on 44 was purchased, the resolution stated that a specific amount of money would be set aside for that. That amount was $937,000, so we're talking just under another $1 million. But this past year, I don't know if you remember, we actually as a board, this money was never set aside. The resolution said it was going to be set aside, but it was always kind of included in that unassigned fund balance that we had. So it could be used towards the town hall, and this board basically took it out of the unassigned and put it in its own account, so we know it can only be used for that new town hall. Next one's the repair reserve fund. Again, this board, we basically year to year during the budget, what would typically happen was they would put in, boards would put in about $50,000 to $75,000 in a contingency line under expenditures in the yearly budget. For the first time, this board, we worked to think outside the box to, as you see, we have money that's unassigned in the town. It kind of seems silly to constantly be taking another $50,000 from the taxpayers when we had this money, and they allow us to create what's called a repair reserve fund. So this board, instead of adding the contingency into the budget, we set the money aside for contingencies. There's $75,000. It was established this past year. It was created to finance repairs that are needed within the town. And there are rules around this. We can't just go out and spend money unless it's an emergency, and then we have to refund it back into there. But it saved residents money by not having to collect more money every year as a contingency. Parks and Recreation Reserve Fund. This has just over $250,000 in it, $287,000. When this fund was created, they were very specific on what that money could be used for. So it's for the construction, reconstruction, and acquisition of park equipment, buildings for parks, land acquisition for parks, building and land improvements related to parks, and capital expenditures related to recreational programs. This was created back in 2004, so this one's been around for a while as well. So that's another $250,000 there. We have an infrastructure reserve fund. So this has just over $650,000 set aside in it. It was created to finance the construction, reconstruction, and acquisition of roads, bridges, sidewalks, streetlights, sewer, water, and buildings related to these items. And this was also created back in 2004. So the overall theme in a lot of these is that a budget is we're trying to do our best to figure out what the expenditures are going to be, and we're doing our best to find out what we believe the revenues the town's going to take in, and the difference in those, we end up taxing the residents and we collect the difference. So over the years, it's never exact. So at the end of the year, the leftover money goes into unassigned fund balance. So previous boards and this board has a responsibility to look forward on things that we need to invest in. It's just, buildings fall apart and whatnot. So all these funds were set up for that by previous boards. There's a highway equipment reserve fund, which if you pay close attention, we've used money for purchasing trucks and equipment up there. Right now it has $216,000 in it, and that was created back in 1999. It's a reserve fund for the funding of highway equipment purchases. So on the budget, you'll sometime, I believe it's shown as an intertransfer fund. So if the highway superintendent is during budgeting time saying, hey, this truck is going to need replacement, it's X amount of years, we'll put in the budget to actually transfer money. This stays funded through the budget. We end up transferring money in here to keep it funded so we can buy stuff like that. We have a recreation trust fund. This has about $20,000 in it. This is not a reserve fund that is established using general municipal law. This trust was established pursuant to town law, so it's a little different than the other accounts I was talking about. It can only be used by the town exclusively for park, playground, or other recreational purposes, including acquisition of property. And this is basically, if you've heard about recreation fees during subdivisions through the planning board or the zoning office, those recreation fees go into this recreation trust fund. The auditors were talking about a whole bunch of little other accounts that we have set up. These are all the accounts they were talking about. So you can see things in there like the lighting district, there's money set aside for that. The HRA funding, so our employees, if they're full-time and they get health benefits, we supply them with HRA. Escrow accounts, Hometown Heroes, there's money set aside for Rettle Park. So there's a whole bunch of extra money sitting in a bunch of set aside for that. So we're going to talk about the difference between assigned and unassigned funds. So now we're talking about what the auditors were explaining. So the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is the accepted standard setting body for establishing governmental accounting and financial reporting principles. So their definition of assigned fund balance classification are intended to be used by the government for specific purposes, but do not meet the criteria to be classified as restricted or committed. So that's kind of all the stuff that we just talked about. They're restricted or committed. They can't just be spent on anything. There's restrictions to them. Unassigned fund balance is the residual classification for the government's general fund and includes all spendable amounts not contained in the other classifications. So the auditors were talking about $1.1 million that was assigned within the fund balance. So these are some of the things that the town boards in the past have identified as areas that we need improvement within our town. And so we've gone ahead and assigned $1.1 million to different projects. Now, this does not lock it into these projects. And I don't want to get ahead, but we'll get to the actions by the town board. So you can see Neubauer property, we have $200,000 set aside for now. You have things like Rettle Park development, an extra $100,000, playground equipment, things that we as residents have been talking about for years of improving, and we have the money to do it. We just need to come up with the plans and set the money aside and do it. So actions by this town board. So we can't go back in time and fix or, it is what it is. We're here now, so we're responsible for moving forward. So what are we doing as a town board? So we understood that it's time to invest back into the community with your taxes that have been collected over past years in ways that will add value to you. So I'd go back to that previous slide. Actually, I think it's going to go to, we have passed a resolution to allocate $1.1 million towards investments that will improve future cost savings, such as LED lights that the supervisor is pursuing, provide improved and more recreational activities, so updating some of our equipment in parks, and fix neglected town infrastructure that we've been complaining about, that needs care for us. We're also looking at some of the funds and accounts we just went through to help fund future projects. So things like the water district, the new town hall project. As you walk through them, you can see how some of these accounts, we could draw money from that and potentially use it towards some of these projects, and that's really what they were set aside for. We're going to start meeting with bonding companies to investigate options for larger projects. So let's take the town hall, for example. There's been talks that obviously we need to raise money to construct and redo that building. So the finance committee, the supervisor, we're currently starting conversations with bonding companies. We've had a couple meetings to pursue potentially taking out some debt. So the residents sitting here, living in Pleasant Valley today, don't have to pay a couple $1 million and invest it all into a building that's going to be used for generations to come. We can spread that out over the next 25, 30 years. And then continue to adjust the budget process to benefit the residents. Anybody in the room or watching at home that watched the budget process this year, this board really took the time and energy to really dissect and dive into this budget. Just to give you an idea, when we first received the budget, our budget was slated for a little over a 5% tax increase. At the end of us working together and whatnot, we actually came back with a tax decrease of 1.7%. And what it is obviously this money didn't accumulate overnight. It's been years of a budget. The budget changes. It's not going to be 100% accurate. But we've taken on the idea of really dissecting into the expenditures for the town, really dialing in if, okay, do we need $10,000 for expense for this line item if we've only been using $800 every year? I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that drastic, but that gives you the idea. Also, revenue side of it. Do we typically budget $800,000 in sales tax revenue, but we've been bringing in $2 million every year? Again, that's a drastic comparison, but this board really took the time to go line by line and try to tighten up these numbers, which allows us to take less money from the residents and also keep investing to hopefully bring up our home values, to want people to move here. It's a win-win for everybody, and we could do all of these things without taking another dollar from anybody because we have the money to do it. We just need to put the plans together. Another thing you might have seen is in the past people have, and I agree, that things might have been rushed for projects and the funding wasn't set out in place, but we as a board have agreed that going into the future, and you might have seen it in our conversations, is the questions asked a lot of where's the money coming from? So we've all agreed that when we're doing any of these projects, there needs to be a budget. We need to take the money and set it aside before even starting step one on moving forward, because we need to really concentrate on making sure that we're spending your money in the right place for the best cost. And then the last thing is creating a fund balance policy. So right now the town doesn't have a written policy of what to do with all that unassigned fund balance. As the auditors ended their presentation, they talked about creating this policy. So when you get to a certain percentage of the operating budget or over that, there'll be a policy that tells and directs the board and the budget officer of, hey, you're at X amount of percentage, you should be at this percentage, these are the procedures on how to maybe move that money into some of these other accounts for future uses or assign it. So there's a lot going on financially. This kind of just timed well with the auditor's presentation because we kind of were waiting for their results to come back. As you can see, the town is in a good financial spot. We have very low debt and we have a lot of extra funding in reserves because of good planning by previous boards. And I think it's time, we're all committed to start reinvesting in the things that people have been asking for, and we have the money to do it. So we just wanted to give a kind of a bird's eye view of where we stand financially. And again, if you have any questions, none of us have, again, these numbers are from a month ago. None of us have the numbers in front of us. So All of our business cards are outside the town clerk's office. Pick up any of our business cards, send us an email, and I promise that one of us will get you the information you're asking for. But tonight, throwing questions at us about numbers, I would hope you would want the right answer, and we might give you the wrong answer by just trying to shoot answers off. So thank you guys. I hope you learned some stuff and it was beneficial.
Michael, thank you very much for that.
I'm sorry, yeah, absolutely. Excellent work, Michael, thank you. All right, so as Michael just said, I want to reiterate. So you saw some things up there. You may feel the need to ask a question right now. Not a good idea. All right. For instance, you saw some of the ideas of some projects we may have. $200,000 to the new Bauer property. There's no formed plan whatsoever for that, so we don't really have an answer as to how we're going to spend that or what to do. So save those questions for another time. And like Michael said, you can pick up our information. Certainly email us if that's a concern.
And just to add to his point on those assigned funds, like when it comes time to do some of those projects, we are then going to have to pull it out like we did for the new town hall and allocate it for those, which most likely in a lot of cases will open a permissive referendum, require input and whatnot. So they're just assigned to his point. We're really not at that stage yet.
Right. They just recognized, and that's what we looked at. Okay. Moving on to the public comment of the portion of the meeting. So at this time, I move that we open the meeting up to the public for agenda items only.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The floor is yours, folks. Anyone want to ask questions on agenda items? So what we're going to do, sir, hold on. And here's what we probably to save a lot of time. Mr. Hart, you can go right up. Usually if you want to, come up and answer questions, stand right in a line. This way we can keep the rapid fire going. And say your name, where you're from, your address, rather, we know where you're from. And state your question. Or
How about now?
That's
Perfect. Good evening. Chris Hart, Smith Road, Pleasant Valley, former town board member. Before I begin, I'd like to ask the board to consider dedicating a page in the minutes tonight to longtime resident Jerry Haight. Jerry served on numerous committees, organizations over the years, was instrumental in the Charlie Johnson Memorial Committee, as well as overseeing our town's insurance needs over the years. Anytime there was a question or a concern with insurance, Jerry was able to come through the door, answer the question, and he was truly a stand-up gentleman. I'll be missed. So I asked the board to consider that.
thank you.
Looking at the overall agenda for tonight, it's good to see that, let's say, the town hall facility use requirements are being taken out, dusted off. But looking online, I saw that you had the town of Wappingers, I guess, as a guideline. How does that compare with what we currently have today? Because I know our facility use for the town hall had requirements for insurance, so on and so forth. And we adopted that probably back under the first term of Frank Szynski. So you may want to compare the two before you move forward in your discussions tonight. The next thing is the public hearing for the firemen's and volunteers property tax discount. I think it's great. But I think you as a board have to work with the commissioners to define what those rules and regulations will be for those volunteers to get the discount. And looking online at the proposed law, it's like, that'll be defined later. And you can't hold a public hearing unless you have that out there. You need to define it. It's like trading a baseball player to be named later. One of the things you may want to consider, there's a sliding scale. X amount of calls, X amount of training, 5%. Incentivize our volunteers so they can achieve that 10%. Just something you should consider. The senior tax exemption, as you'll note in your resolution, has a defined set of values. We need to do that in all fairness to our volunteers so they know what the target is that they have to hit to achieve that. And I think a sliding scale should be something that you take a close look at. The other thing is the transfer station solicitation. I think it should be allowed to continue. Our scouts, our fire departments, They up there, they're selling tickets, they're trying to raise money. There's the resident to resident, one man's trash is another man's treasure. That swap takes place. And above all, your politicians, they all hang out there, and a lot of you have campaigned last couple of weeks of October and November. I can tell stories that we'd be here all night. Judge Marlowe came up for an hour, loved it so much, ended up staying 4 hours. Interacted with the people, interacted with the residents, and really it's a town center. So I don't understand why you're looking to eliminate that, because really it's the only thing that we have left as a community that we can get together, exchange ideas, talk, exchange junk. And you know what? Credit has to be to Gary Veter. I don't think he envisioned it would become what it's become today when they put that together. I think it was back in the 70s. Full-time supervisor. We dedicated that position by resolution to be full-time back in the 90s. To shift and move that to a part-time position is disgraceful. The move to push to a legislative assistant, that's not what this town's about. You guys, if you look at that job description, collectively are responsible for what you're asking a legislative assistant to do. The people hold you guys accountable. If you're not getting the job done, they vote you out. If you guys put a legislative assistant in there, it just creates finger pointing. This party controls the legislative assistant. He's got to go, elect us. You're going down the wrong road. The supervisor's position is a 40-hour position. They take calls at night, just like I'm sure you guys do. You're there for the residents, and that was decided back by resolution in the 90s. To try to make it part-time doesn't work. Looking at the numbers here tonight, you have a $5 million business. It cannot be run part-time. That's just the bottom line. If you're going to do that, the next thing is the highway superintendent. Let's make him part-time. The town clerk, let's make her part-time. We've got money in there. We need to take these part-time positions and make them full-time. We need more people up at the highway. We need more people in planning and zoning. This is where we should be going, not eliminating the full-time position of super to part-time. So I strongly am opposed to that, and any move towards making it part-time, could be subject, or probably would be subject to a, referendum. Speaking of which, I think a couple years ago, there was a referendum to make it a 4-year position. The residents shot it down. And the reason being is, if you're not getting the job done in 2 years, we're going to vote you out. And basically, that's one of the reasons why it went down. But full-time position, consider it, keeping that, and I'll turn the mic over to the next resident. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve McNish. I live up on Valley View. I'm the treasurer at the library, among other things. The paperwork you have there tonight for the rules for the use of the town hall, I assume that's the rules as they appeared from Wappingers. Just looking at it, I noticed that point 2 and point 4, point 2 says food and beverages, paper products if used must be provided by the using group. Point 4 says no food or beverages are to be used, are served in the large meeting room. This is the only meeting room we've got. So you've got a conflict on that. I'm glad that we're seeing rules on us, because the library provides meeting space for your climate smart people, and we've asked for space here for our mahjong, the friends to have, and it's been turned down. So we'd like a little reciprocity.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Gary Veter, South Point Turnpike, Pleasant Valley. One of the items on your agenda is a town board resolution for waiving permit fees for the Pleasant Valley weekend event. I brought this up once before, and the town clerk was very nice to come and explain her side. I thank you. But I respectfully disagree still. Let me just read what the peddler's permit says. A peddler is any person, whether a resident of the town or not, who goes from house to house, from place to place, or from street to street, traveling by foot, automotive vehicle, or other type of conveyance, carrying or transporting merchandise for the selling and delivering merchandise to customers. That does not include vendors in our park. That's number one. It also says solicitors. Any person, whether a resident of the town or not, who goes from house to house. I won't go any further. It says basically the same thing. So my point of this is you don't need this resolution for waiving peddler's permit fees. You don't need peddler's permits for the weekend. Freedom of speech. I relish it. I'm here giving freedom of speech. The dump is gone. So now we have this nice area where we can stand on blacktop, bring our rubbish, recycling, whatever kind, and talk to your residents that you don't see because you don't knock on doors anymore, and most aren't out where you could find them. Everybody's working harder and so forth. So a place to meet somebody and talk to them should not be abolished. And thank you for the guy that mentioned that Gordon Daly and I designed that and put that transfer station in about 48 years ago.
Evening. Susan Giles, Bellevue, 103 Wigston Road. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the dump. I know everyone has spoken, and I'm just going to reiterate that when I was a New Pleasant Valley resident 3 years ago, I went to the dump, and that is where I met people, and that's what I learned about what this town is about. So I'm not quite sure why we don't want solicitors there. If it's unsafe in any way, then we have an obligation to make it safe. All right, because that's where our residents are going to drop off their stuff. I had heard there was something about as potential lawsuits or whatever, but that's our obligation to keep it a safe environment, to have people bring stuff. So if that is a reason to not have solicitors, that needs to be corrected. The gentleman came up here and talked about the Marjan group meeting at the Town of Pleasant Valley Library, and it was denied here. I'm not quite sure why, but there is a number of organizations in this town that need places to meet, whether it be the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, the senior citizens. We need to maybe think about some of those funds and think about what we can do for the people in the town of Pleasant Valley. That's all I'm going to ask, and so you guys can make that a consideration about how we can serve the needs of all the residents of Pleasant Valley. And I also want to thank you because serving everybody and making things safe. About a month ago, I brought up my concern about a property that had unsafe environment, and within a week it was fixed. So I don't know if that was you, but I really appreciate it because that was really unsafe for any child that lived in that area. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else? Without seeing or hearing any, I move we close the meeting to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. New business discussion. Pleasant Valley Weekends RFP, fireworks and tents. So we gotta put the RFP out for fire.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. Can we just have Emily draft an RFP and we send it out? I don't want to get caught like last year we waited a little too late, so I think we just got to get it done early. That's why I put it on the
We
agenda.
gotta get it done, and I would use the template of last year's needs, because it's probably.
We did a RFP last year, actually. I think you wrote, so.
Okay,
We've raised the limits now, so
Yeah,
we'll have to
so-
look at what exactly it requires.
Yeah, I
but
wasn't, last year we were at the cusp for
Yeah.
one and we were over with the other, so we
Right.
might be under, but it's close enough that we should.
Figure it out. Thanks.
okay, allowing groups to use town hall meeting room. Has your name next to it, Michael? Do you want me to have something? I just have a little bit of a history as to why, first off, it was closed to others. During COVID, obviously, everything shut down, so the least amount of use in the town hall was probably the safest thing to do. So that started that. And in the past, there have been problems with scheduling this room. So this is one room. Okay, so if Group A wants to use this room and Group B is coming in right behind them, Group A has to make sure that they clean the room up, put everything back together and get it out. So the scheduling problems of this room were difficult then. It was never worked out correctly. So that was one of the things. So if you allow Mahjong to come back, you're going to have to let the rug hookers, I don't know who they are, people, the home bureau, that's 40 to 60 people. This will now open us to letting up many different exercise groups to come in, the Office of Aging, blood drives, senior brain games, Pleasant Valley Library, book sale, private Mahjong groups, and more. So we have one room. And this room is really being used 2 days of the week for court. So that's Tuesday and Thursday. We also have Monday nights are for our board meetings. So they really only have Wednesdays and Fridays. Fridays it's set up for the seniors. So it's very limited use to begin with. We've offered to take back the Climate Smart as they are a part of our, government piece, because they come in, they're a smaller group. But to have this room broken down, set up for the group to come in, then broken down again, set up for the next group. We only have 2 guys that are on our maintenance. They'll be in here all the time setting up. So that's one of the other problems. Not that it can't be fixed, but I'm just giving you a little history as to why they're not back just yet. In the past, the Justice Court would get upset because a lot of the furniture by some of these groups were being moved into the court and not returned back, disturbing the courtroom. This would now become a logistical nightmare, right? The town board table would be moved, all this stuff, all this new equipment here has to be protected. This is very, very expensive stuff that we purchased to broadcast to you and to have Granicus, and that's sitting in here, and new speakers, new microphones. All these things would have to be broken down for some of these groups and then put back together. That means we have to have a sound man. If you think we're having trouble putting this out to the TV people now, have it broken down and put back up every week, that's going to be a problem. So it's just really overall a logistics issue that we have yet to tackle. Please be my guest.
Yeah, so the reason why I asked for it to be on the agenda is, I guess to Mr. Hart's point, is from the conversations we've had, I didn't even know that there was a potential policy because.
Well, there's 2. There's one that was updated. Mr. Nick Becker was a councilman, worked on it while I was on, and so that one actually supersedes the one Mr. Hart mentioned, but
Yes.
there are there.
So this was just, so when this conversation came up of, do we allow people to start using the room or not? My first thing was, yeah, why not? And of course, I'm the newest person here and didn't have to deal with anything pre-COVID. But it's like, for example, people moving this or having to pay people to rearrange the room. The point of supplying the town of Wappingers is a lot of that stuff they lay out very specifically in their policy for using rooms such as this is that, hey, you're getting the room just how it is. If it's set up like this, it better be set up like this when you're done. And we can simply, in our policy, say, none of this is to be touched. Nobody's allowed back here. So my thought process is I didn't realize we had a policy because it seemed like we didn't. But we could put in rules like they have, specifically the kitchen, that's been an issue. There's no reason we can't put in our policy that nobody's allowed to cook or prep or use that room. I get it. Is it going to cause more scheduling stuff? Yeah. But I also think that, this is everybody's place, and
Absolutely.
if it's not being
People's house.
used,
There's no question about it.
I think we have a responsibility to at least look at policy and maybe address some of those concerns instead of just saying no, and see if there's something we can do, especially for an event that might only be twice a year. Now I understand, and we can also put in a policy of, it's town organizations first, and then non-for-profits within the town. We can do a scale, which I don't know if we have right now, but to just say, no, we're not going to allow this, I think the first step is, can we mitigate some of those issues by making our policy better before we just blanket say no? That's just my opinion.
We can try to do that, and I understand that, except that for these days, John and I do a lot of interviewing and whatever in this room. So we have odd hours and whatnot to work around everything because we only have one room. When we move, if we move up to the new place, then we have.
Solves all our problems.
Right, it solves a whole lot of issues. Right now, the biggest issue is that we need this room for a lot of different reasons. And like I said, John and I are in here quite a bit doing things with residents or different meetings and whatnot. And to have to work around all of that other stuff would be very difficult for us. And like we said, it's only one room.
Yeah, we don't have a conference room for instance, we've already had many, or you sat in with the bonding guy. Those kind of things can't happen pretty much just about every, this is our room, this is it. This is the
But to
everything.
that point, we could simply have a schedule and a calendar, and it's as simple as, hey, we have interviews on Thursday from 1 to 3. We can't book it. And if it's booked, 1 to 3 already because there's a tournament going on in here, then we would schedule interviews for.
But
10
we would
10
absolutely
days.
have to put somebody
Yeah.
in charge of that.
Well, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just saying is, I would like us having the conversation of how can we mitigate this than just saying, no, we're never going to entertain this till we move.
I don't think anyone's saying, no, it's
No,
not
it's
happening.
just-
I think
right.
it's just the logistics coming back out of the doldrums of COVID, how we're going to handle it better than we did before. I think that's the only issue. So, anyone else want to?
There are times too that, we have a couple of days' notice that all of a sudden, we have to hire a new court constable. And we had 8 people apply for it, send letters of interest, and within a few days, we have to set up.
But for me, that's an excuse. We have the courtroom that's not used most of the time during the day. We can find room to do that kind of stuff. We don't need to be doing one-on-one interviews in this gigantic room. I'm just putting it out there that I think the conversation, we need to look at that because we're not moving from here for at least another year and a half, so.
Yep.
For after-hours meetings, it might be good to find out what Wappinger does about giving people access to the building, because that's a concern.
Yeah, so in their rules, and that's why I provided it, because that was one of the concerns, is they don't allow people to use it outside of regular hours, unless there's some other meeting, and maybe here it won't work that way, you would have to use it during the hours. So they address that and say, no, you just can't use it, so. And I don't know if everybody, I sent an email to the engineer with everybody copied that if we do that plan on the left side on the second floor of the building up on 44, we could do what the library did, and there's an entryway in there. We could simply put an interior door that would cut off that whole section to the rest of town hall. So if there was a yoga class once a week that was taught there, they could have access in just to their room, and we don't have to worry about the rest of the building. So there's ways to make it easier, of course, when we get up there, but for now, if it's 2 times a year for a tournament.
Yeah, it's like I said before, it's not no, it's just how. I think that's all we have to really start concentrating on. Anyone else want to weigh in? Not hearing any. IT committee, town IT upgrades. Mr. Mazzella.
So Mike and I and Melanie had a meeting with Logically about some of our aged computer equipment. If you remember, I would say, under Supervisor Figliozzi, we averaged, I think, replacing 1 to 2 computers a year. Under Frank Szynski, we didn't replace any computers unless there was smoke coming out of it. So, and now we're 2 years, we're 2 years again. So, we have to replace about 8 computers. I didn't have the actual numbers when I created the agenda item. We got them late, but it's in the sum of $85,000 because we need to replace 8 computers plus the new firewall plus the new server, because the server is from 2012. There's a lot of IT equipment that needs to be replaced, unfortunately, that just hasn't been done. And we just, honestly, it needs to be done because we're going to be out of compliance soon.
Well,
So,
it's been the recommendation of the auditors as well.
yeah.
That a lot of the protection for cyber attacks and stuff falls under the most modern stuff that has
Yeah.
the best way to go. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Just to add to that, I've been speaking to Emily about how this falls into our procurement policy, because I know there was conversations that this would fall under ARPA funds, so basically that number is really high, but it's not just for 8 computers. To his point, the firewall, we have a whole server room. Basically, logically, that server is outdated as of October. We can't use it anymore, so we have to upgrade it. The ARPA funds can cover it, but we need to find out if our procurement policy, with the contract that we have with the IT company, if we just purchase the stuff from them, or if we have to go out to bid for certain items. So that's why we're kind of holding off for now.
Yeah. But I will say, from looking at their quote, it's going to be a lot of work on their part. Like the labor number was very high, which I'm not surprising. I mean, they're going to replace basically everything in that room back there. So,
Yeah, and those type of things are considered a professional service, but we just have to look at the component that's
I got you.
purchasing.
Yeah, I'll get you the,
equipment and see if we need to get.
I'll get you the price they sent me, and we
Comparison.
can go from there.
And just for those of you folks who don't know, the server room sits in a room that has to be kept temperature controlled. It's difficult, to say the least, and it's not fun back there. All right. Anything else on that? Constable, court constable vests. Councilman Orban.
Okay, after being run around the bend a little bit with a couple of companies, come to find out there was a company in our own backyard called MES that can supply us with the bulletproof vests for our constables, who are way past the time of having these. So I got the quote. The quote comes to $9,022,932. And we have the money put aside for it. And I would, without getting into detail, because there's so many details about these vests, it's ridiculous. It's on the government OGS website. And I would like to make a motion on the floor to go forward with this and get our constables equipped appropriately.
I'll second that.
Yeah, why not?
We already assigned the funds, didn't we?
Yeah, the funds are already assigned. in the-
Yes, it's already
Let's
assigned.
write up a
We have, I
resolution.
think, 10,000 set aside for it.
I have no problem.
All right.
So you'll
Okay,
need,
but
you'll need a budget amendment to.
Because of the amount though, don't we have to RFP this?
It's OGS.
It's
so
OGS.
It's already on
Okay.
state contract, yeah.
All right.
Good call, though. But do you have to do a budget transfer to put those funds?
Yes, we
Probably.
do.
We will.
Do you,
Probably.
do we need to do that tonight? or
No, we
should
can do it for the
we-
next meeting.
Okay, all right.
It's not
So we'll do it
necessarily-
April 3rd then?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Mary Beth? Can you have that? Are you doing your Granicus thing? Oh, we're not hooked up yet? All right. Just note, we're going to put that onto the agenda for April 3rd. Thank you. All right, no soliciting at Town Transfer Station, Mr. Mazzella and Ms. Albrecht.
So Mary and I were talking after our most recent insurance payout, if you will, up at the transfer station. This is not something that other towns really do. I get that this is where people go and have conversations, but we just most recently had a lady shatter her kneecap up there. So, and our insurance company picked up the bill, luckily. So I don't think this is something that we really should allow going forward. I mean, we've talked to, prior to you, I've been on the board for 4 years now, right? So prior to you, Emily, every other town attorney is, I should not allow that. Our insurance company told us we should not allow that. I don't know why we still do.
So, I don't understand, people are gonna fall. They could fall here, so we shouldn't have a town hall. We shouldn't have anyone come to the town hall. Insurance companies have a job to do. They don't like to pay. That's the other thing they don't like to do. So, when you have people bringing their garbage to a place, they still have to bring their garbage. They could fall just bringing the garbage. If no one talks and they all stand in a single file and they all bring their garbage in without looking left or right, and they put it in, they could still fall. We could still get sued by the insurance company. So I don't really get the idea why we consider it. That's my point. That's my take.
Yeah, and the bottom line is this lady slipped on the ice when she was there getting rid of garbage. And, it's the only slip that's happened there since I've been on the board. This past Friday at the transfer station was speaking with the former highway superintendent, and he said that in all his years he could only recollect one lawsuit for a slip and fall at the transfer station. I believe Mr. Dunn was there and heard the same thing that day. A slip and fall can happen anywhere. Somebody coming in to pay their property tax can slip on the ice on their way into the town hall and slap us with a lawsuit. To me, that is nowhere near a good enough reason to refuse soliciting, gathering, whatever at the transfer station. Sorry.
I'm not saying anybody can't fall walking in anywhere, but what I am saying is it's a high-risk area due to the machinery, due to a lot of different things up at the transfer station, to the point where my personal opinion, if that's what we're talking about, if we're talking about personal opinions here, I don't think it should be allowed. If the board decides to let it be allowed, then so be it.
Well, you heard my opinion. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Well, I'll just let you know what I drafted, that's in front of you today. So you have the existing section of the town code for refuse collection that governs the transfer station. And so it's hard, you can't tell on this draft, unfortunately, it doesn't come through what I added. But on the second page at the top where it says operation of refuse disposal areas, I added that letter B just for you to consider, saying that access to the refuse disposal area is limited to people who are there to dispose of refuse, employees working at the site, and others with official business like deliveries or repairs, but no other presence on the site. So that's, that's for your consideration based on the concern about the accident that occurred. The town there are certain areas that are considered a public forum, and that's where people are allowed to gather and, talk to one another, and there are others that aren't. And so if this area is for trash disposal, it doesn't need to be a public forum.
I don't think it needs to be, but it has gravitated to being that. And we have very few places where people actually gather and talk and communicate, and where the Boy Scouts can sell whatever, or they collect bottles and they bring it in. And, if this was a regular occurrence, if this was something that happens once a month, where, I don't know, someone's acting the fool up there and they fall into the compactor or whatever the case may be, there's a million things that could go wrong, but haven't, because everybody, I believe, and I've witnessed it many times, are extremely respectful of one another, handle everything. The two gentlemen that work there are fantastic. I just don't see the problem. One lady slipped, fell, I'm sorry for that. She fell on ice. If there was no ice, this doesn't even come up. So, again, if we can bring proof that this is a, you know, an everyday thing or something that's, you know, bigger than that, you know, I don't see it.
Well, in the roughly 24 years that I've been a Pleasant Valley resident, all the way back as far as I can remember, yeah, the transfer station was just a gathering place. Yeah, people solicited there, people would look for petition signatures for permissive referendum because it was a good place to hit a lot of residents and tell them what was going on and why, you know, some people felt you needed to have a permissive referendum and that an item should go to the voters. I think that's a good thing, personally.
Can I ask a question?
You know what? I don't think it's broke, so don't try to fix it.
Can I just, I want to take time, but to your point, to me, I don't personally have an opinion one way or the other on this right now, but to just throw it out there, the issue I'm having is, I'll give you an example, is you just said people go up there and we petition and we campaign up there and whatnot, but I guess the question is, there's no law either way of what's allowed, where it's allowed, but I mean, there was somebody holding a campaign sign standing in front of the mill site this last campaign cycle, and you stopped, went over there and told them they had to leave. So the conundrum I'm having is,
That's a memorial.
but I'm just saying is, we don't allow it anywhere else. How did it get to being allowed? And talking about freedom of speech and whatnot is, I think, okay, if we allow this here, which we do, it should be allowed everywhere, or we just say no everywhere.
And it has been allowed everywhere. It has.
Well, that's
Katie
not,
Field has been used for different things. It's been all over the place. I recently had to go myself, and there was a bunch. I can't remember the candidate, whoever it was. It was over the last election cycle. I'd never heard of the person, and they were out in front of the post office, and the post office, the postmaster general asked me to have them move. I says, well, it's kind of freedom of speech. You really can't stop that. You know, you can't tell them that I says, if they hinder your customers from coming in, that's a different story. And I asked them to please remain on the curb, and they did. They were very respectful to it. But it's a freedom of speech piece. Now, in defense of Councilman O'Hanlon, at the mill site, that's a little different. That is a memorial to our men and women who served. And that should be a sacred ground, and you know how mad we all are about the vandalism that's gone up there. So there's some places where you shouldn't be yelling something or doing something and should be asked to leave. It'd be nice.
And I agree with you on that, but I'm just tying this to for example, I think it's a good idea that campaign signs shouldn't be put up more than 30 days prior to an election, and they should be limited. We're not allowed to just do that because that's imposing on freedom of speech. So to that point is, I get it. Do I want somebody campaigning at the mill site because it's tasteless? Of course. But how do we as a town differentiate between yelling at people at the mill site and saying that's okay, but then allowing people to be at the transfer station? And again, I'm not bringing up the lawsuit or whatnot, but if we're going to make the argument that we have to look at the big picture here, and if it's allowed there, we all have to agree that it's allowed everywhere on all town property, because that's not the case right now. And I don't care either way with this. I'll go with whatever the majority wants to do, but just keep that in mind, is that we can't even put a regulation on campaign signs.
And I think you're stuck with it. We just had an incident with the parade. It was, you know, listen, freedom of speech is freedom of speech. End of story. You may not like the guy cursing, defacing, whatever, but you have to respect the fact that it's his right to do so in this great country that we have, period. I'm sorry. And yeah, it might have been wrong to ask that fellow to stop campaigning at the mill site, but he had the right to do it.
Just making sure we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Anyone else want to add on to this? Okay. Moving to new business resolutions. And I don't, Michael, have to be reminded not to have to read the whole thing. I love the fact that I don't have to do that anymore. You all have the resolutions in the back. If you want to read all this, be my guest. Town Board Resolution Number 224 of 2023, authorizing the increased hours and budget revision for Deputy Town Clerk, Ms. Deborah Dougal. Just to give you all a little idea, we're asking Ms. Dougal to be the secretary to the Fire Advisory Board, who used to have a secretary years ago. For whatever reason, that stopped. We're putting that back in place. It's about 2 hours a month, so it's not a big deal.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 2022-2023, establishing the rates for the Town of Pleasant Valley Youth Junior Leadership Day Camp Program.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 2021-2023, establishing the rates for the Pleasant Valley Camp Sunny Days Summer Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 2023, resolution accepting donation of a 5.7 parcel of land from the Kim Lawrence, Kelly Reddle Hardesty, Carrie Reddle, Daniels, and Christy Reddle.
So moved.
Second.
I just want to say, again, I know we've already brought them here, but thank you.
Yep.
And we've already started working on the plans for there, and I think it's a great addition to our town parks.
All in favor?
Aye.
They're jumping around a little bit because some of these are older things, but Mary Beth got it all. I'm trusting that she's got it right. Right, Mary Beth? Town Board Resolution 219 of 2023. Resolution commencing the local law adoption process for the proposed local law B of 2023, a local law amending Chapter 86 taxation of the Town of Pleasant Valley Code to add a new article titled Tax Exemption for Qualified Volunteer Firefighters and Ambulance Workers.
So moved.
Well, do we want to consider,
Second.
Now you got it. Now
second,
you
do we want to consider some of the comments brought up as to putting in, and I had asked this, I think, when it first came out, what are the criterias and what are the goals?
I was hoping the county legislators would still be here because I think they just started this process, and I was curious what they put in their law.
All right, so you want to hold off until we find out from them and see what they have? Or?
Well, you're setting a public hearing, so you can take input at the hearing and then modify it from there if you want, or we could wait. I mean, it says that if the individual is an enrolled and certified member of an incorporated fire company, fire department, or volunteer ambulance service for a minimum of 3 years, they get the 10% exemption. And then I think the slightly more complicated part is if they want the lifetime exemption, then there needs to be a certification process.
Well, I also noticed it said incorporated fire department, not incorporated volunteer fire department. Shouldn't that be in there?
Yeah, so I think we have some modifications to do
Okay,
here.
we can do, before we set the hearing.
And
Sure.
let's just neaten that up before we do set it. It's not,
Can I just ask, if we make this a law, who, does it state in here who is in charge of verifying this
no,
stuff?
there's another.
So can we lay out like the procedure of, okay, if I've been with the fire company for 20 years, who do I go to? Do I go to the assessor? What do they have to do to verify it? So I'll make a motion to table Resolution 219.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Who should we follow up with to?
I'm going to start with the
edit this?
county legislators, and then we'll also maybe put this to the fire commission and see what they
Okay.
have to say.
Great.
Yeah, I think we all want to pass it. We just want to clean it up first.
Yeah, and this will be starting next year, so there's not a big hurry.
This is all the same one, right? Yeah. Okay, Town Board Resolution 218, resolution commencing the local law adoption process for the proposed local law of A of 2023, a local law amending the senior citizens tax exemption income level.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I think we could set this date. All in favor?
Aye.
When do we want to do it?
So it says April 3rd.
3rd
But
it is.
we had written that when this meeting was going to be 2 weeks ago. Is that too soon to advertise? No, it's okay? All right, so April 3rd.
April 3rd it is. Proposed local law of 2023, a local law amending the senior no, it's the same one. They came apart. Town Board Resolution 220 of 2023, waiving peddlers' permit fees for the 2023 Pleasant Valley Weekend event.
So moved.
Second.
So just, I wrote this resolution because last year, previous years, we were charging as a town for folks who would do the peddler's permit, the fee. But because we want as a board to promote the event and make it less cumbersome, there was no reason to, we don't rely on this revenue in a line item.
Right.
So, but to Mr. Veter's point, has this always been required or?
I checked the law, and it's peddlers, solicitors, or transient merchants, and I think it
A vendor would be
it
transient.
could be, yeah.
All right, so this is just, I mean, people still have to get the peddler's permit, but they're not going to be charged by the town to do it, so
Right.
there's not an extra cost.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 2023, amending the 2023 general fund budget.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 226, budget modification to 2023 general fund.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 227, authorizing payment of abstract number 3 of 2023.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pay our bills. Town Board Resolution 229, appointment of Town of Pleasant Valley summer camp staff.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 228, authorizing payment of abstract number 3P of 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's all of that. Old business discussion, creation of a legislative aid position. So we have here in front of us some of the guidelines of what the legislative aid position would look like. Has anyone had a chance to take a look at this? I have.
Yeah, so this came from the labor attorney, Brooke, and we've had discussions as a board. Right now, we currently have a secretary to the supervisor position that was created. That position is 30 hours a week. That was set by resolution that was passed. It's also potentially a competitive position with civil service. So the town, back when we appointed our previous secretary to the supervisor, we filed for an exemption with civil service. We're still waiting on that to come back, but we've had discussions that it might be more beneficial to maybe think about having a legislative aid position instead, for multiple reasons, but one of them being that it's an exempt position with civil service, so we don't have to deal with any of that. And, there's a lot of stuff that goes on here day in and day out that, in all honesty, is either taken on by people in other positions that really take them away from their main job. So a perfect example is our great bookkeeper. I mean, I don't know if people know, but our bookkeeper does all the onboarding, all the new employee paperwork and all of that stuff on top of being the budget officer and the bookkeeper as well. The health benefits, everything like that. So we created this secretary, the supervisor position, but I really think that we don't need 30 hours a week communicating with us and putting the agendas and stuff together for 2 meetings a month. We have Granicus now. The town clerk's office has taken over managing the agendas and the resolutions. We're already paying the clerk's office to do that, so that's going to save money for the residents right there. And other towns are doing this, and to me, talking to our current supervisor, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to pursue this over a secretary to the supervisor. The only thing is we have to, and we've even talked about keeping it part-time this year, training the person up in all of these different things such as HR. And we've talked about an HR person. This would allow our employees to have a non-elected person to go to and be able to bring the information to the board. To me, it's a no-brainer, but I'm just one person, so.
So, we have had conversations, you and I both, and I've been screaming for a human resource person since the day I stepped on here as a councilman. This town has needed one for years. It's something I think this should be added in. It is into this particular layout for this job description, which I think is very, very important. I think this position is necessary. I think it should be a full-time position. I'm not so sure yet as to whether or not you can say that a supervisor can be part-time. And we've talked about it a little bit, and I'm still trying to wrap my head about all the hours that I put in that I don't account for just sitting here. All the things that I should be doing, which I feel I haven't had an opportunity to do. There are so many meetings and things that go on in the county level and different things in the area that really a supervisor needs to be part of. And I don't see how a part-time supervisor can do it effectively. That's the only thing. I think we should have both full-time, personally. That's just my take.
Well, I have to agree with the supervisor pretty much 100% here. Well, I think a legislative assistant that's full-time would be wonderful. It would take care of the HR problem and a few other things. When you come in with a problem and you go to the supervisor's office, you know, an appointed employee shouldn't be taking care of your problem. Your elected official should, okay? And, you know, that's one of the main reasons I feel the supervisor should remain full-time. And I don't see the supervisor being able to effectively do his or her job and serve the residents in the capacity that he or she was elected to do in a part-time position.
Do you guys have a comment before?
Well, I mean, I do think that there is a need for the legislative aid in terms of, I mean, you think about taking on projects, right? It's hard for any person who's running for a 2-year term to take on 3, 4, 5, 6-year projects, right? Like, let's just call a spade a spade. So this kind of eliminates that because this is somebody who the majority of the board has to control them in a matter of speaking, right? Like, in terms of the board hires and fires this person, so it's not just one person like a bookkeeper to the supervisor, right? So it's they answer to all 5 board members, whomever they may be, and they could have a long career with the town. Like, this could be something that they could do many good things for us, and they're not somebody who is of political nature, let's say, so that employees don't have an issue bringing their concerns to them.
So, yeah, that lends to the human resource piece. We definitely need that, and if it's somebody that can handle that piece, I think that's the catalyst to this position more than anything else. And we've talked about that with our attorney, our labor attorney. I think reading this, and I've read this a couple times, we need to tweak it a little bit for our needs. I don't think that this position is a bad idea for this town at all. I think it's very, very important. I'll be honest. I know she's here. I miss Jen being here. I can't tell you how many times she reminded me where I had to be, what I had to do. And it's difficult scheduling yourself. And there's so many variables, so many different things that happen during the course of the day. I can't tell you, and Mary Beth will tell you, how many times have I started a sentence to respond to something, and I don't get back to it until almost a day later sometimes because of so many different things that happen. And that can be taken care of by this person as well, to clear that deck,
Yeah.
to allow the freedom for that to happen. So I think it's definitely a needed position. We could discuss the supervisor going part-time another time, I think, but I think we should take this step first, for sure.
So the good thing timeline-wise with this is, in all reality, they wouldn't, what we've discussed is that this wouldn't be a full-time position till the budget, because we
Right.
don't have the budget.
Right.
So they would come in part-time. I think, honestly, we have time on our side. It's March. We can find the right person. This
Yep.
doesn't have to be a quick, hire the first person that comes in.
can
I
take our
think it's
time.
really important to get the right person, and then realistically, sometime over the summer is when we should have somebody. If they come in earlier and we find them, then so be it. And then in the next upcoming budget, make this a full-time position. Just to come back, I know it's the next thing on there, but we've been talking about is the part-time supervisor. The idea really for me was talking to you and you explaining to me how your day operates and whatnot, and I understand the importance of being accessible as a supervisor. And I think that's something that the residents need. But at the same time, to your point, those meetings at the county, and I know you always talk about the meetings with all the other supervisors are so beneficial to you, and meetings with engineers and all this stuff. I think we have to step back and really think, okay, are we as residents getting the biggest bang for our buck with our supervisor, having them sit in that little fishbowl for 5 days a week, and you can walk in and you can talk to the supervisor every day whenever you want? Or would it make more sense and we'd get our money's worth and more things would actually get accomplished if the supervisor had a set day with hours, or it alternated or whatnot, and they would go and do the big idea things and have those important meetings and come back to the board? And so this didn't just, this is not something where I'm just like, the supervisor needs to be part-time. This really came from talking to you, and I know how how long your days are and the stuff you're dealing with, and in conjunction with the legislative aid can do a lot of the stuff that you're spending your time doing, where you're not going and able to do all those other things that would benefit the residents. And just to put it out there, it doesn't have to be you're only part-time or you're only full-time. I mean, in all reality, we're talking of a budget modification for next year, potentially, and saying, listen, you don't have to sit in that office for 5 days a week from 9 to 4. That's not productive for anybody. It's, listen, you have the flexibility to schedule your appointments. You have office hours to do that with the residents, or they go to your legislative aid and you contact them or meet up with them. And this person deals with all the monotony day-to-day stuff that we don't need you dealing with. And I know it upsets a lot of people, but I didn't come on this board to just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. I came on this board to maybe think things a little differently and see if we can provide a better service to the residents. So I get it. I'm not set one way or the other if we have to go part-time or full-time. It's just a thought that maybe it'll work better for us and the residents potentially doing this.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
I just think that the time we're talking about that I could be spending outside, or any supervisor, I should say, spending outside of the office will amount to about the same amount of time if he was still in the office 9 to 4.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only doing maybe a third, if that, of of the stuff that could be done. I remember Mr. Figliozzi was on the board with the watershed people down in Wappingers. I haven't had a chance to even talk with those folks, and that's very important, seeing that a lot of it comes right from here and starts here. So I think we should, the first part of this, I think we should go full steam ahead, start the person off part-time, find the right person, work them into the position, and then when you get to the supervisor position, You could all discuss that next year.
So are you okay with me meeting with Melanie, figuring out the budget that we had for the
Absolutely.
position we have right now, and coming to you about filling in some of these blanks of part-time, the hourly rate, and proposing a resolution to create this at the next meeting?
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, looking ahead though on this, we find somebody as a part-time legislative aide. He or she is working out great. We want to roll them into full-time. How does this fall with civil service? Are we going to have to recruit from?
No, so if you can come up to the mic and just give an overview. This is one of the benefits is that it's an exempt position, so no matter if
Okay,
it's
well,
full-time.
that's the
or
magic word, exempt, okay.
It's actually an unclassified position, which is a third category. That is where you don't have to go through civil service at all. I'm Brooke Youngworth, by the way. I'm the labor and employment attorney. And I did already call civil service. They've already approved it. They've already told me that it's unclassified and that because it's unclassified, they don't have anything to do with it. So we could pass it if we wanted. And there is a draft resolution in there as well for you.
Thank you, Brooke. All right, so we already discussed the part-time supervisor. Continued discussion on requiring sign for public hearings.
Yeah. So this was like Town of LaGrange, Town of Poughkeepsie, they require, if you're having a public hearing, you have to put up a sign on the property. I think it's within 10 days. So then if you don't get your notice in the mail, or if you live outside the parameters, you might still be interested, it might affect you, you'll see the sign, and maybe you'll come to the public hearing. So I wanted, Emily had done a bunch of research into this, so I don't know if the board all saw all of that, but some of the proposals that you made.
Yeah, I just pulled a few laws from other towns for your consideration. I think the biggest difference is whether the town, so the idea would be to require the posting of a visible sign on the property 10 days before the public hearing. Some towns, the town provides the sign, like they have either a reusable sign that you can, write
We
the
have that.
date in on or something like that. Or else, so if you're gonna provide the sign, you don't need to have quite as many specifics about what goes on the sign because people just use the sign you provide. So I think that's probably the easiest way to go about it. And so I'd be happy to draft up a law for your consideration if you'd like.
Yeah, and that's how just the Town of Poughkeepsie and the Town of LaGrange, that's what they do. They fill the sign out, and then it's the applicant's job to go and put the sign up, and then during their public hearing, they have to present the chairs with an affidavit saying
right.
that they did it. So if the board's okay, I think it's a good idea to maybe propose the law.
I think we should propose it.
All right.
Temporary sign proposal or change? The same thing?
Yeah, Emily,
No,
this
that's
had,
a different one.
yeah, this had gone into the campaign signs and temporary signs as well.
So the question was about, well, arising from the campaign signs that are put up on the roadsides and whether those could be limited so that they're cleaned up after the election and don't, just stay out for a really long time. And as I discussed with the board, you can't regulate campaign-related things differently from other types of signs or considered speech. And so what I found was some laws related to temporary signs for the board's consideration. And the one that I pulled, let me see. Yeah, this was the Town of Bedford. And what they did was they said that you could have any temporary sign up for a maximum of 30 days, and it needs to be removed within 3 days after the event for which it's displayed. So that would be an election. So you can put it up to 30 days before the election, and then you have to remove it within 3 days afterwards. And if they're not removed, then the town can take them down, and the charges can be charged to the organization responsible for the signs. I'd want to find out how they do that in reality, because you never really know who put what signs up. But at least it gives the it gives an enforcement option for the town. You know, other towns just say you can't have those signs out at all, and if you put them up, they're considered littering and they get thrown out, but I'm not sure, you know, what direction the town board wants to go.
Well, actually, you know, as far as the last couple elections, it seems to me both sides of the aisle, you know, within a day or two after Election Day, all the signs that were kind of in common areas, you know, they got them down pretty quick. And, you know, but on the other hand, you know, you can't go up on somebody's front lawn and, you know, pull his political signs up. That, you know, that could get you shot or bit by a dog or something. But, I mean, both political committees, you know, these past couple elections, I think really got them down pretty quick.
Keith, thanks for clarifying that. The Bedford law is only for signs in the town right-of-way on the sides of the roads, so it wouldn't apply to people putting signs in their own yard. That's their speech opportunity, and they can take it down when they're finished.
I think the idea behind this was more of any temporary signs, having a time frame before the event of, listen, it doesn't have to be 30 days, it could be 45, it could be whatever we want, but having a set date of, okay, if your event's November 4th, you can't be putting signs up for your event at the end of August, because none of us want to see that. So that's kind of where this is coming from, not really the taking it down of the signs, but putting them up and a time frame for that.
I have to agree with you there, because there have been times in the past few years where I've seen event signs that were still up, you know, 30 days, 6 weeks after the event, and somebody, you know, the people that put them up should be made responsible to take them down. Come on.
So where do you want to go with this? Do we want to propose the law, or do we want to write it up to do that, or change the law?
I mean, I'm obviously in favor of putting some limit there, but I know a lot of these laws come from the planning or the codification committee back in the day. Is there some way to include at least the planning, or if it has to do with zoning, those get input from them as well? Like during the process?
Would you like me to draft something and send it to the planning board and the zoning administrator?
If everybody's on board, I don't see why not, yeah.
Planning and zoning. All right, this goes over for special consideration. I put it in the spot. Waiving the,
No.
We have the junk car.
well, wasn't that special consideration? This
There'll be
We just put it under old, it's been,
Yeah.
same thing. All right,
it's just a
junk cars, let's do it
discussion,
now,
so.
get it over with.
So I just wanted to update the board. You guys all got a printed copy of it. It's on your desk, so now we have the 10-day until we can pass this law. It's the junk car law that we've been talking about. So we had conversations with our zoning administrator, the attorneys, and some concerned residents to address some of the issues of you have a truck that you just plow with, or you have a car that's not an antique, but it's a 2005 and you consider it a collectible, but you might not register it. So we made one change we're proposing. If you look on the back of the first page under section 4, under the exceptions, number 1, it used to read one of the exceptions was temporary storage of an unregistered motor vehicle owned by the property owner for no more than 180 days in a calendar year. So if you had a truck that you just plow with, or you have a car that maybe is unregistered because you just bought it for your 15-year-old and you're working together to make it nice and you're not going to put it on the road till they're 16, we made a change to now one unregistered motor vehicle in operable condition, which is owned by the property owner. This law wouldn't apply if it was that case. So I think it covers a lot of the one-offs of, it's something we should be doing, is making it as close to right as possible, but it seems like everybody's pretty much on board with that. So I wanted to make sure the board's on board with that as well.
I
So
like
just
it.
to clarify,
It seems to really
Sorry.
Did I cut somebody else?
No, go ahead.
I like it. It seems to really just clear up pretty much all of the concerns that I got from constituents in one sentence. I'm good.
I'm good.
Yeah, so there would be no time limit. You can have one unregistered vehicle for any period of time. And we thought that would, and as long as it's operable, not, completely disassembled or junked. And we thought that would take care of a lot of the concerns that were raised about, something to use on your property or, all the potential things that come up. You get one vehicle. Beyond that, it's a problem.
Okay. Now, old business resolutions, waiving the PV, Town Board Resolution 211-2023, waiving the Pleasant Valley weekend registration fees for town organizations.
And so I'll make a motion to untable this because we tabled it at the last meeting.
Second.
And just for clarification, there was some confusion on this.
Right, and
We
that's
we
cleared
thought
up.
this was the peddler's permit. This is
Right.
just the registration fee that the committee charges people, so this
Right.
is separate.
Right. And all in favor of untabling it?
Aye.
Aye.
Town Board Resolution 211-23, waiving the permit for the, for town organizations.
So moved.
It's already been motioned
Oh,
and
that's right.
seconded at the
Yeah,
last
that's right.
meeting, so we just need a vote on
Any
it.
more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we already did the items, that was that. At this time, I move to open the meeting to the public for anything.
Second.
Do we got to vote on that, though?
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, folks, round two. Once again, Chris Hart, Smith Road. I'd like to commend you, though, on the financial presentation. I know during the last election cycle, that was one of the key items that was asked for fund balance, and nobody knew. So it's nice to see that all broken out. I'm going to throw this one at you, give you a heads up. The town should be looking to hire a power grid valuation consultant. And you look at me and say, well, what is that? For the last 7 years, they have upgraded the power plant down here on Route 44. And that valuation is determined, as I know it, unless it's changed, in conjunction with the authority that's building it and the New York State Real Property Tax Division. I believe they send the value every year, every other year, to your town tax assessor, and he updates the rolls. To me, that's the fox watching the hen house. This has gone on for 7 years. All types of circuitry, switchgear has been put in there, and on top of it, you now have an additional power plant switch station off of Van Wagner Road. A power grid valuation consultant is commonly used upstate New York in the Niagara Mohawk generating area up near Niagara Falls. And the reason why I can tell you this is that back when we had a tax certiorari with Central Hudson and Con Ed, we were getting ready to go to litigation. And one of the key values, they said it was this, and well, the information we had nothing to defend it. And the attorney said, well, we can hire a consultant and get the true value. We were all for it, but the Arlington Central School District, which has a major piece of that tax revenue, opted not to get into the litigation with it. So I think as a town board, you should be looking ahead. Let's find out what the value is on these upgrades to these power plants. Reach out to the school district, get them to work with you to pay for part of this, if not half or whatever, to get the true value of just exactly what we have in town. Because as we take more properties off the tax rolls, we give more breaks to, people who deserve them, of volunteers. We need to recoup that revenue. And I believe that revenue's been sitting there and it hasn't been touched. If you look at the new power poles that are going up through the valley, the new highways that they have underneath to maintain them, that's all increased valuation. On top of it, which a lot of people, and I believe the New York State Real Property Tax Division doesn't take into consideration, there's fiber optic plant that runs on those right-of-ways that they get revenue from. All your internet broadband goes through these fiber optic cables that they lease out the property to these companies. That's revenue and tax valuation that this town should be grabbing. So that's why, I think you should go and start now looking for that consultant. The other thing out there is Smith Road zoning issues. Still hasn't been resolved to date. I'm going to leave you with some numbers. 1 year, 45 days. That's how long it took to build the Empire State Building. Our town hall, we're going on 6 years, 3 supervisors, 3 town boards, and still no town hall. So think about those numbers as you guys move forward in your deliberations and trying to get things done. Thank you very much.
Steve McNish again, Valley View Road. Regarding scheduling of the room, we have a scheduling program for the rooms in the library. Now that we have 4 rooms that are used about 75% of the time. So if you would like, we can probably make some kind of arrangement with the director so you can find out what the program is, how it works. Maybe it would help with that and that. So if you, any of you, give me a call, 845-489-4630. I'll work with you and get something together with the director, and we can work that out.
Thank you, sir.
Carol Campbell, Marshall Road. I have a few things to talk about, so hopefully you'll indulge me. Number one is this creation of a legislative aid position. I sat here tonight. Thank you to the town board for finally giving us an overview of the finances of our town. All the time that I was here and came to board meetings, I just think that was very thorough, and I welcome it. But I'm going to use some of that on my comments. I listened to the bantering back and forth about a legislative aid position versus a confidential secretary versus a full-time and a part-time supervisor. As somebody who was on the board 4 years and sat here was supervisor for 2 years, I personally agree with Mr. Hart that this should not be a part-time position. When I look at the amount of money that the town has, I think the town can afford to have the positions it needs. I am in favor of a part-time legislative aid. I agree with Supervisor DeVecchio that this would be a great help to the supervisor, but it also would give us some continuity between positions when supervisors come in. I have to disagree, though, that it's not a political position, because in most towns it is. So to say it's not a political position, I don't agree with. The other thing about being a supervisor, the town, like Mr. Hart says, didn't want to go to a 4-year supervisor. They want the ability to remove somebody if they don't think they're doing the job. And you can't do that with legislative aid. So be very, very careful when you're picking a legislative aid and trying to make that position more powerful than the supervisor. It's not, okay? The town hall is open certain hours. And the residents in this town would prefer to come in and talk to the supervisor. The supervisor is the person that's here when the rest of the town board cannot be. They elected that person. That's the person they want to ask questions to. So I don't believe that you should have a part-time supervisor. I think you should have somebody that's here to answer the residents. I think the fix for this is to have a legislative aide and a secretary to the town board. I understand that Supervisor DeVecchio was talking about on having somebody take care of the calendar, kind of help them know where they have to do. And I think that this town has the money to have both after sitting here tonight and listening to this. So I would encourage the board to consider keeping that secretary position and also hiring a legislative aide, HR, and all of those things, it would be invaluable. That's my on that. The other thing is, a government is different than normal business. And people expect their government, their people they elect, to be here. It's a little different than the CEO of a company. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is the agenda. I think you might have missed Pleasant Valley Weekend RFPs, fireworks, and tents.
No, we got it right off the beginning.
I'm sorry.
She's
went by
creating one
quick.
for us. We're going to vote on it next week.
Okay, this is what my agenda looks like. I apologize. I understand that you've got the new program doing the agenda. This is just my critique for something for the board to think about going forward. I want to see a numbered agenda. I think this is very hard to look at. It kind of all jumbles and it's hard to figure out what each one of them are. It's just for reference for housekeeping and making it easier. I also think it makes it easier when you're trying to match the resolutions, correlate them when you do the minutes. You know, I also like to see, you know, resolution numbers and whatever when I'm looking to find things. I wanted to give a special thank you to the town board for organizing the meeting that they had on the new town hall. I found it invaluable. I want to compliment Councilman Albrecht and Councilman Reifenberg and you know, Frankie, the whole board, for the comments that they had on the plan that was put up. I think that they were great comments, and I think that they're going to help us going forward. I'd love to see something like that done with water when we get to that point. So therefore, I would love to know how close we are, if we're any closer, but if the board could please think about doing the same thing with water. I want to piggyback a little bit on Mr. Hart's talk about the transfer station. I was involved very heavily, and I've mentioned this before about the transfer station, not the transfer station, I'm so sorry, the Central Hudson, the power station. I do see everything that's going on. I do remember when we had to, the town had to come up with the money to pay for what was going on and what the school did. I think that I'd like to see, I know the supervisor's busy, maybe there could be a committee to try to look at that a little more as to what's going on. When I drive through town, I do a, oh wow, just about every place I go. And the last thing is the transfer station. I happened to be up at the transfer station on Saturday, and the two gentlemen that work at the transfer station had already seen the agenda. So they were, you know, making some comments about what could possibly happen going forward. You can see it, right?
Well, they would have seen it. I'm just, you said Saturday. And
Yeah.
It came out Friday.
Right. So my take on it is the people that were there, just what I heard in an hour, I'm not campaigning, by the way, I was just visiting. The people that were there were already upset that they feel like it's a place to hear about town things, it's a place to talk with each other, and they were already upset. I would caution you on that. But the other thing is, you know, if you're gonna not have people solicit, I think of other places in town, Katie Field, we have a movie night. People, and I know we don't own the fields at Pleasant, where we do baseball and soccer, but we do O'Bower Park. So I think that if you're gonna limit the transfer station, you have to, and I think Councilman Reifenberg was talking about this, you have to, you know, talk about it all. The last thing is the proposed junk vehicle law. I can't say enough kudos to Emily and Councilman Reifenberg about how hard they worked on this. I know that I had a lot of comments about it. I do believe that last thing to put in there will help. It definitely will help, allowing that. I know that I'm not going to get everything that I asked for. I personally do not like the outdoor storage having to have a building or structure with a certificate of occupancy. I still think that's a little stringent for what we would make the residents to do. But that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not on the agenda, but usually we have the comments at the end. It's usually one topic. It's okay. It's not your fault. Sorry? No, it's not your fault. Don't worry about it. No. You're fine. You're fine. But usually, like at the end, we call it, it's a one-time only kind of thing. So in other words, you pick one topic and I get it. You missed the first part.
I waited on these to
I
have
know.
a discussion for the board.
That's fine.
Okay?
It's quite all right. We're going to waive that little thing tonight for everybody.
Good evening. My name is Brian Aldridge, live on Margaret Court in Pleasant Valley. And as far as the town dump goes, or transfer station, it's one of those things that are unique to small towns. It's a gathering place like we've all discussed tonight. And the bigger question is, the day in question, since there was ice already on the ground, why wasn't that addressed before the dump was opened? Therefore, you take public safety first over the dollar. By allowing the dump to open and knowingly you had a condition, why wasn't somebody brought in to say, hold on, time out, let's shut this down, take care of the problem. If the problem couldn't have been dealt with in a reasonable amount of time, you keep the dump closed for a day. Yes, it would be an inconvenience, but you wouldn't be in litigation with what you just did. On the other side of that is, whatever you took in that day for revenue, I'm sure didn't come close to what you had to pay out in liability. So in all honesty, the public safety should have been put first. It happened in the wintertime. A lot of these other organizations that want to use it to solicit or whatever, it's done in the more conditions where you don't have to worry about slip and falls. To take that away would ruin the whole unique aspect of it. So if you take it, it's got to be equal across the board for all organizations, which would be a shame because some of them rely on that because it's their only way of communicating. I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Peter, South Point Turnpike. I'm probably one of the few that remember our dump on Pine Hill Road. It went up with mud up to your knees, and it was certainly harder to navigate to dump your rubbish in conditions with heavy equipment operating, and the liability was a lot more at that point. This is 120% improvement over conditions that were. I suppose I could save this to December, but it was brought up tonight. I have spent quite a few mornings coming down and visiting with the town supervisor. I have found him very open. I hope it's been mutual. We kick around things, ideas in town and so forth, and new ones and et cetera. But he's been there full time. I know we've all discussed that here. But that hasn't been the case. Full-time supervisor has been around for a long time, and he has been full-time. I can't thank him enough for what he's done, and I'm glad that he's taking care of his health, but I'm sorry he's leaving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Kruger, Rawls Road. Yeah, I have a transfer station. If there are places that you're going to learn what's going on here in Pleasant Valley and be able to talk to your residents, it's the transfer station. That and Dunkin' Donuts and probably Carl's Barber Shop. I mean, those are the places that you are going to learn what's going on here in Pleasant Valley. It's freedom of speech. I mean, it's that simple. And slip and falls are going to happen anywhere. I mean, you can walk out here on an icy night, you're going to fall here too, just as easily as you could fall. And that woman wasn't soliciting, so that had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on at the transfer station. So, you know, you're going to get sued. I mean, our library, when we were building, we had an accident there too. So accidents are going to happen wherever. And of course, we heard, oh, nothing's going to happen, you're not going to sue. That's a bunch of baloney. Guess what? An accident's going to happen. Everybody in God's creation is going to get sued. That's just the name of the game. So it happens. So it is what it is, and that's why you have insurance. You better have insurance in these days. So, you know, it's the transfer station. And the reality of the situation is you can do what you're going to do. You can say what you want to say. But the reality is people are still going to be there, and they're still going to talk. They're still going to get together. You're not going to stop them from getting together there and talking and doing what they're going to do. I don't know how you're going to stop it from happening. So I think you're going to be fighting a losing battle, and you're going to create a lot more problems than you're going to solve in the end anyway. And you're going to make people more upset than they're already going to be anyway. So anyway, town water. I keep asking. It's been months, actually, that I've asked. Right? I know. You told me you were going to say something about it a few months ago.
We got an email, so we did get an email with some information, but we're, unfortunately, I mean, like,
months.
All right, let me give you a real quick synopsis of where we were and where we are now and what we have to do before we can actually present to you. So we took what we know of, a plan that was started, and we brought our engineer in, and they looked at that plan, and that plan was very expensive. That engineer looked at an alternate plan, which was probably half that price. So we were very, very close at that point in time. Then something happened, and we got pushed further back. All right, and I'm not at liberty to say what that is just yet until we make the presentation, so. And now we basically back to the drawing board for another possibility.
And I mean, I don't know if Carol was alluding to this when she said it, but it's devastating, and I'm glad you mentioned it about the power plant and so forth when you drive by. God, it is so sad. We moved here 35 years ago, and I remember when my kids were going to West Road School, and I drive down West Road now, and I just want to cry when I drive by, and I can see through West Road all the way to 44, and it is devastating to see. And I use the word, and I hate to use that word, but the land is raped. It is absolutely raped, seeing it just, from West Road all the way through to 44, all the trees that are gone, and you just see the power plants, and, you know, seeing up by South Point, it's just awful what has gone on. It's just horrible. And then I see what's going on at Wixton, and I'm terrified of what's going on, and what God knows what's going to happen up there in the future, because you guys didn't vote that down, and I don't know what's going to happen to this town, but it's Pleasant Valley, I mean, you know, you put Acme up, and I mean, you know, it's nice, they've done lovely things up there when we do our food drive, but boy, when you took down the hotel, that was just the downfall, and I'm terrified of what's going to happen to this town. It's just, I'm worried. I mean, I'm just worried. I don't know if you're proud of what it looks like, but I'm terrified when I drive by and I see what's happening.
I think we all share your concern.
Yeah, it's just, I just hope for better roads. I mean, there's that picture that somebody put in the Facebook about the guy fishing in the potholes on 44, and it's pretty realistic. I'm not,
So,
am I?
once again, 44, not our road.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
I can't stress it enough.
And I'm gonna keep asking about the water, because I really
Keep
don't wanna
asking,
see
that's
people
fine.
fishing on 44.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi,
You-
everybody.
You're way too happy since you're not working here.
Jennifer Adams, 34 Shagbark. Michael, that presentation was fabulous. Kudos. In regards to the supervisor, it needs to be full-time. As somebody who sat in that office, the minute Johnny left, I was getting yelled at. Constantly. I'd send him a text after he left. You just walked out the door and I'm getting screamed at. This was at least once a week. It would be a huge supervisor position part-time. He needs to be, or she needs to be in there full-time. I think I absolutely agree with Carol. This might be a first. We absolutely need a secretary and a legislative aide. One or the other needs to be full-time. There have been times where I've punched out at 30 hours and still worked. And as for other employees here that do the same, our employees need to be full-time here. And I can tell you firsthand that that is the truth. We have the money. It needs to be both. We need a legislative aide and a secretary. One of them needs to be full-time. Melanie cannot do the HR. It's a conflict. And it's not fair to Melanie, and it's not fair to anybody in her office to have to deal with it. But we definitely can afford both, and it needs to be done. And Johnny, thank you, and you know how sad I am that you're not running. So you've done a wonderful job, and I know everybody agrees with me.
Thank you.
Okay, so but definitely huge mistake to make it part-time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Valerie Hovasapian, Robinson Road, Salt Point. I just had a question about the computers, how many computers are we, well, will there be more details forthcoming, I guess? is
Yeah,
my
there will be.
question.
We have actually, we got details late that weren't added to the agenda,
Okay.
so they will be for next meeting. You'll get to see the specs on all of them.
Okay.
And the full price.
Because that is a lot. I mean,
Well,
just
so it's
have-
not just it's 8 computers, a server.
I understand.
A lot of what goes on in that room, and then plus all the manpower to update everything. And
No,
and
I understand. I've done a couple of these where I work, and a lot of people use cloud-based servers, which still isn't cheap, but you know. And maybe there'll be a new website too. Maybe. Okay. That was my
That's
only
definitely
comment. Okay. Oh, and what is the timeline for if they are making a decision about part-time, full-time supervisor? Is that in the future?
Well, I believe we just discussed tonight that we're most likely going to look for a part-time person right off so they can start the process of learning. But we're going to take our time to get our person
Yes.
that's going to make.
I meant in term, yeah, no, you did say that. I meant about the supervisor position, especially since there'll be an election. I mean, so
Yeah.
is it going to be full-time, part-time? When
That-
will we know?
That probably will not happen until the next board.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone else, I move to close the meeting to the public.
John, 1 second. Going back to something somebody said in the beginning about putting a blank page in the minutes for Jerry Haight.
Yes.
I think we should do that now so that,
let's
Yes,
close the meeting
absolutely.
first, but for yeah.
or you can, oh, I'm sorry,
close the
I'm
meeting
sorry.
first. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
So
Let's close the meeting to the public first, and then
we're going to close the meeting to the public. I moved. I heard a second. All in favor?
And I'll make a motion that we dedicate a page for Jerry Haight in this for this meeting's minutes.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make the motion that we go into executive session for 105.1F personnel.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for coming tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Spread the word.
That's okay.
Pleasant Valley's not that bad. And you, I'm going to get you to clean. I make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We need to call the town clerk back in. While we wait, be sure to turn your clocks ahead. Didn't we do that already? Any public announcements? Yeah, okay.
So John made the motion, Frank seconded.
Yep, we're on.
I made a motion to come out of executive session. Councilman Rozella seconded. All in favor? You ready? While in executive session, the board took action in regards to a personnel matter. The board also took action in regards to retaining counsel for a pending litigation. The cost of the engagement is already covered and approved by existing letter of engagement by labor